Good morning, everyone. Welcome back. It's great to be together on this Lord's Day morning. We're going to be studying the prophet Habakkuk. We're officially 2 weeks behind, but that's okay. I've got a plan. It's going to be just fine. We've got 4 weeks left in this quarter, so Lord willing, if we finish this short book of Habakkuk this week, next week we'll be studying the final kings of Judah. That takes us down to the full captivity and destruction of the temple. Then that gives us a week to look at Lamentations and start Daniel. Then we'll finish Daniel on December 21st, and we'll have 1 week in the book of Ezekiel on December the 28th. So just wanted to give you an idea of where we're going. I realized a few weeks ago you guys don't really have the syllabus of where this class goes unless you were to look in the teacher's manual. So those are the books that we'll be covering in our completion of the period of the captivity. So we can take some time today to look at this minor prophet in this book of Habakkuk. All right. Well, I'm happy. I found my notes. I had to fill out Habakkuk again last night on my own 9-question handout. And this morning I just found it there sitting under the pew. So I've got my 2 sets of notes this week. So we're here at Habakkuk, and historically we've come all the way now up to the period where the captivity is going to begin. And so maybe you've seen some of the background, not a whole lot of background given on this book of Habakkuk, but in the Waldron material it does mention the approximate date of the book. And so maybe you're getting this date of 605 BC, 605 as the beginning of the captivity. And so really the general dates of this book are just kind of right before that. 610 or so BC, kind of before the Babylonian captivity has begun, before the nation of Babylon has come to the doorstep of Jerusalem. Might be some time before that, but it's during the reign of which king? If we're in that 610 to earlier period? Josiah. During the reign of Josiah. And so when we think of Josiah, we think of his goodness, his reforms in Judah. But it's also important to recognize that even though he was perhaps the best reformer that Judah ever saw, that it didn't really stick in the hearts of the people. You see kind of a surface level faithfulness from the people of God. And so even though you're in a period where, if it said that they were faithful all the days that Josiah lived, and yet you see these condemnations continuing to come. And that's because God knows the heart. He knows that they're worship to him, even though it might have turned back to the truth, where they're no longer worshiping idols, they're worshiping Jehovah, that it's not coming from the heart. Flip back to Jeremiah 3 real quick. We'll just see that briefly. Jeremiah had shown us the hearts of the people and the hypocrisy. Jeremiah chapter 3. And Gil, can you read verse 10? Oh, sorry. Anybody want to read that for me? Brent, 3 verse 10.
Yet for all this her treacherous sister Judah did not return to me with her whole heart, but in pretense declares the Lord.
Okay, so Judah didn't return to me with all her heart, but in pretense, as Brent's version says, mine says, but rather in deception. So it's a deceptive return. That's the hearts of the people. Now flip to chapter 7, to Jeremiah 7. Kiara, are you there? Yeah, look at what it says in read verse 4. No, just verse 4.
Do not trust in deceptive words, saying, this is the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord.
Okay, so you notice the word deceptive words there again? It said they returned to me in deception. And here it is, deceptive words saying the temple of the Lord. Now, Dad, if you can read 9 and 10. And 11, please.
Okay. It says, will you steal, murder, commit adultery, swear falsely, burn incense to Baal, and walk after other gods whom you do not know, and then come and stand before me in this house, which is called by my name, and say, we are delivered to do all these abominations? Has this house, which is called by my name, become a den of thieves in your eyes? Behold, even I, have seen it, says the Lord.
All right, so verse 11 should ring a bell for us. Who quoted that verse? Jesus, right? So here's the origin of Jesus' quotation about his house being a den of thieves or a den of robbers. And so who is he referring to when he talks about these robbers? It's the men of Judah. The men of Judah who are coming before God are actually thieves, verse 9, murderers, adulterers, idolaters. So just this is the landscape of the people of God when Josiah is making his reformations. And yes, they're returning to the temple of the Lord. There are these people, verse 10, who are saying, before God, we are delivered. Maybe putting their hope and trust that the Babylonians won't affect them, even though they're destroying all the nations around them. And so that's the heart. That's what's underlying the heart of the people as they inch closer and closer toward destruction. And so then you have another prophet, Habakkuk. So turn on over to Habakkuk right after Nahum. And you have a very interesting book, a very interesting prophecy, because you have kind of two chapters of maybe conversation between Habakkuk and God. It's not so much, a thus saith the Lord, go tell my people this, but it's Habakkuk and God having a conversation. And Habakkuk asks two questions, and God provides two answers. Those are the first two chapters. And then the third chapter is a prayer, a very, very, very thoughtful, very emotional prayer. In fact, in chapter 3, you see a big word there at the beginning where it says, a prayer of Habakkuk the prophet according to Shigionoth. I guess that's a Hebrew or Aramaic word there, and the translation is it's a highly emotional, poetic form, or a prayerful song. So that's kind of how we should read the third chapter of Habakkuk. All right, so let's talk about the content here. That first question I gave you, put Habakkuk's first question in your own words. Anyone? Shirley? How long do I have to wait? That's a good way to put it. Anyone else? You see those key words, how long? And what was it specifically that Habakkuk was feeling like God's not doing that he should do?
Helping.
What's that?
Helping.
Helping, okay, but helping how?
He's wondering about passing judgment on Judah.
Yeah, it's these. It reminds me of the tears of Jeremiah, where we looked at why he was the weeping prophet, why he was weeping, and it's because everyone around him was wicked, right? And he didn't want to be among this wickedness anymore. And Habakkuk has that same feeling. I cry out to you, violence. Why, verse 3, why do you make me see iniquity and cause me to look on wickedness? And so he's in Judah, in Jerusalem, and yet seeing a place full of wickedness. How long will you allow this to continue? So what's God's answer?
God says, I am going to act. I am going to do things that you would not believe it.
That's right. Verse 5, he says, be astonished, because I am doing something in your days you would not believe if you were told. Who's he raising up? The Chaldeans. And so the Chaldeans and the Babylonians, those are interchangeable words. So just know that as you run across that word, that's just an older, I think, term for the people who arose from Babylon. So that he's talking about him raising up the Chaldeans. What is it about that that might be hard for Habakkuk to believe?
Because the Chaldeans were so wicked.
Yeah, right. Initially when I read through this, maybe not quite understanding the timeline, I thought it was because this is such maybe a far out prophecy, and maybe Babylon wasn't a powerful enough nation yet. But no, understanding right where we are, we're on the cusp of Babylon coming to destroy them. This battle of Carchemish may have already even happened or was about to happen, with Pharaoh Necho going up there to defend the Assyrians against the Babylonians. So there's certainly a rising nation out of the east coming, and it's Babylon. And so those who have been hoping, and Jeremiah has been prophesying, no, this is going to happen. You're going to be destroyed. And then there's false prophets who've been pushing back, saying, no. Okay, we might go into some captivity, but it won't be for very long. There's certainly discussion about what's going to happen with Babylon. But what's impossible to believe is that the Chaldeans are being raised up by God himself. A wicked people. Yeah, Dad?
This phrase, I will work a work in your days which you would not believe if it were told you. Haven't we heard that somewhere before in some of the earlier studies that we've seen? I couldn't find that phrase. I tried to find it, but I couldn't.
Okay.
It sounds really familiar.
I don't know if you want to check it out just now, but my Bible links over to Isaiah. Let's see. Yeah, Isaiah 29:14. Does it use similar language?
Similar. It says, "Therefore, behold, I will again do a marvelous work among the people, a marvelous work and a wonder. For the wisdom of the wise men shall perish, and the understandings of the prudent men shall be hidden."
Yeah, similar concept there. That's Isaiah 29 is a prophecy of the destruction of Jerusalem, warning Jerusalem, which is called Ariel in Isaiah 29, verse 1. And so this idea of a destruction coming, that they wouldn't believe that God would destroy the place that he put his name, right? He said he would put his name there, establish his name there forever. So why would he come and destroy his own place? So it would be hard for people to believe. Have you wrestled with that question or questions like it? I wanted you to think about this with both sets of questions, because I find Habakkuk to be highly relatable. And we want to glean that encouragement from seeing a man who is just like us. I don't know anybody named Habakkuk, but this man is just like us, just like all the prophets were, dealing with the same challenges and questions and maybe doubts that we face. So how might we have asked a similar question to God? Jude?
Especially verse 4 where it says, "Therefore the law is powerless and justice never goes forth." I mean, that's pretty relatable. I feel like a lot of times we ask, oh man, this isn't fair. Justice isn't going forth. And I feel like, this world just isn't fair, and that's a common question that people ask. Definitely wrestled with that before.
Yeah. So seeing maybe what we think is the ineffectiveness of God's word, boy, that almost feels faithless to even utter those words. But we might feel that way. Have you ever spent a night at the fair trying to hand out invitations and gotten 0 bites? And you feel like, this isn't working. Maybe we need to dream up some other way to spread the gospel. Or nobody's interested in what God has to offer. The world's just full of carnality. They'd rather be at the demolition derby than talking about God's word. And you start to feel like, boy, how long do we have to do this? Imagine those who preach the gospel in difficult fields, and nobody is interested. Nobody's responding. Like Jeremiah, perhaps. Prophets have felt that way through the generations. Elijah, who felt like there's nobody who, wants to serve you. I alone am left. And he was wrong. Gil?
The comments just made me think of Noah. How they said he was a preacher how long did he build the ark? And
Yeah.
just preaching to the people that didn't. They only saved 8, so
Yeah.
Nobody listened.
He was called a preacher of righteousness.
Right.
And yet, just he and his family were saved. Nobody took him up on that offer. Brent?
So to kind of relate to Habakkuk, sin abounds in our world today, and our government is backing those sinful actions up. So to sit there and know that God is in control, but to watch what is happening with our government and the things they allow, like hate speech and things like that, to get put on us, that's hard to follow.
It is, yeah. Yeah, I think, especially those of us who are highly patriotic and love our nation, you want to believe that brighter days are ahead, and then you just continue to see things deteriorate, where the culture just gets worse and worse. And, the things that used to just be spoken of in secret, like maybe homosexuality and LGBTQ and all that stuff, now are in every movie, even the kids' movies, and it's just, they're trying to make this normal. And how long do I have to put up with this? Randy?
From a religious standpoint, we look at, we talk about denominations and things, other denominations that begin to support what you just said. We wonder, and then we see them grow and, seems like flourishing.
Yeah.
And we wonder, we think about, judgment for them
Yeah.
because of the terrible things that they're doing against God's will.
Right. Yeah, we wonder when's God going to deal with that. That kind of gets to his second question a little bit, where he's wondering, how can God approve of these things? I had you go look at another how long text, and that was on question 2, Revelation chapter 6. One of my favorite songs in the book is How Long Till the Morning. And so we sing that. I'm sure there's quite a few who like that song. It's got great content. But just singing this question of how long is such a scriptural concept that many of God's children have asked. And so one takeaway you certainly want from today's lesson is it's okay to ask the Lord these difficult questions. We bring our complaints, we bring our questions to God himself. We don't reject God and then go complain, but you do see faithful men, faithful prophets bringing their questions to God. Pour out our hearts honestly to God. And here you see these. This is an image being shown to John, but what was the how long question? These are souls under the altar, and what do they cry out?
How long before you judge and avenge their blood, how they were persecuted and
Yeah, these are the souls of the martyrs, those who had died because of the testimony which they had maintained. Imagine if things get that bad to where we're living in this world knowing that we might suffer death for preaching the truth, and we've got loved ones who have suffered death. They're gone because of simply teaching the truth of God's word. You might cry, how long, oh Lord, are you going to allow this to keep happening? And here they're crying out for vengeance, because as we know, the scriptures say, vengeance is mine. We're not supposed to take our own vengeance, but God owns the vengeance. Verse 11, anyone want to read that for me? Jesse?
Okay, here in Habakkuk.
Yeah, sorry, we're in Revelation 6, verse 11. You there, Jesse Jackson?
1 second.
Oh, okay.
I was still in the back.
No, that's all right. We're
And
flipping around a lot.
white robes were given unto every one of them. It was said to them that they should rest yet for a little season, until their fellow servants also and their brethren, that should be killed as they were, should be fulfilled.
All right, so what's the question? What's the answer to this how long question?
My version says rest for a little while longer.
Yeah, Kiara said rest for a little while longer. What was that, Shirley?
I said, you might not see it in this lifetime, but you'll get your reward in the end.
Right. I think that's the message. That's the message of this vision. What were they given? They're given a white robe. And then they were told to rest a little longer until the number of their fellow servants and their brethren who were to be killed, even as they had been, would be completed also, which means the answer is, well, there's going to be more people who are going to die first. Jen?
I just keep thinking, I mean, God's our Father, and as parents, we're constantly teaching our children pretty much, like, all the time, and they're sick of hearing us. But even when we go travel and enjoy the ride, there's a lot of discussion in the car, because they see other billboards or they still see other congregations, and they'll ask questions, and you gotta explain, and when they don't, you'll bring it up and answer a question that you probably haven't asked yet. And so it's like a constant parenting thing, and that's God with His Word, so.
Yeah. Yeah, and we can relate these emotions that we see in the prophets even to our kids' emotions and help them to see that these are normal ways to feel. You know, why does God allow that to happen? Well, some of the answers are given here. Well, God's going to judge those people, but not yet. Even when you're driving in the car and they're saying, are we there yet? You know, asking a how long question, right? Well, we might have to suffer for a little while longer. That's the answer given to these faithful martyrs. They might have to wait a little bit longer. So when we, you know, ask our how long questions, how long am I going to have to endure this? What are some of the answers that we might get? When we see how some of these how long questions are answered. How long do I have to endure this illness? How long do I have to deal with this bad relationship in my life? What are some of the answers that we might get?
God sees fit to change it.
Till God sees fit to change it? And perhaps it might be not until we die, because maybe the relief doesn't come until the end, right? He's allowing this destruction to come on His people, and how long until the relief comes for them?
Until God's will be done.
Yeah, His will is going to be done. And in this case, His will might be hard for them to understand, but He's letting them go into captivity for 70 years. And those are the righteous. Gil?
Paul had a how long question, or when will you take away this thorn in my flesh?
Yeah.
Not exactly the same, but similar. My grace is sufficient, basically. So keep going.
Just keep going. Yeah, my grace is sufficient for you. What you have is enough. And that might be the answer. You can glorify me with your current situation. And it's not what you wanted. It's not what you envisioned for yourself. There may be great suffering, but you can glorify God through that suffering. And so it's a message of endurance, something that should encourage us to be faithful to God and endure. Any other thoughts? Any other how long questions and how you might apply the scriptures to those? Randy?
There are people, elderly people, when they lose a spouse and they continue to live, ask the question, how long, Lord, will I have to live on this earth before I die?
Yeah. That's right. Yeah, we were just with Bonnie's grandmother, and her husband passed shortly after Jude was born. And she's been sad ever since. It's been hard. And it's been a small mercy that she's started to forget things, because she's not remembering her sadness nearly as much. But yeah, that's a trial. I think about this phrase where he says, you would not believe it even if I told you. When we ask God for an answer, we may not even really be comforted by that answer. Here, the answer is, He's bringing destruction, and it's going to be terrible. The answer might be, you're going to live 20 more years without your beloved spouse. And it's not going to be, you're going to be lonely, right? That's not all that comforting, but it's the answer, and maybe we shouldn't focus so much on those things. Shirley?
When my dad was living with us, he said, I don't know why the good Lord is keeping me here,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Yeah.
because he was suffering so, and he was ready to go on. And I said, well, it's not your time yet. You know, that's the only question or answer you can give.
Right. Yeah, we see in Ecclesiastes where it talks about he makes all things beautiful in his time, and we sing in his time. I think about Matthew 6:34, where he says each day has enough trouble of its own. And so let's not worry about how much longer am I going to have to do this. Let's focus on each day in a day of faithfulness. I've got this pain, I've got this situation, I've got this problem with a family member or problem at church, whatever it is. I can endure, I can be faithful to God through that challenge each day, taking it a day at a time. Okay, so back in Habakkuk verses 5 through 11, he's describing the destruction that's coming, and that's this destruction from Babylon. And then beginning in verse 12, you get the second question. What's Habakkuk's second question? In your own words.
Why do you allow wickedness to continue?
Okay. Anyone else?
Babylon is more wicked than us, so why would they be the ones that are doing the punishing?
Yeah. Yeah, why are you silent when the wicked swallow up those more righteous than they? That's the end of verse 13. Does God approve of evil because he's raising them up? Right? When God says, I am raising up the Chaldeans, it sounds like he is for the Chaldeans. He's not with you anymore, Judah. He's with the Babylonians. And of course, Habakkuk recognizes these are a wicked people. Talking about all the things that they've done and their pride, the destruction they've brought on others, bringing them up with a hook, verse 15, dragging them away with their nets. They gather them into their fishing net. Therefore, they rejoice and are glad. Therefore, they offer a sacrifice to their net and burn incense to their fishing net, because through these things their catch is large and their food is plentiful. And so this, in verse 17, will they therefore empty their net and continually slay nations without sparing? Just the wickedness of taking what they want in their own pride and then giving glory to inanimate objects like they would in their idolatry. How can God approve of these things? So what's God's answer? What did you find in, kind of goes on into chapter 2. What did you find in terms of an answer here? Clarissa?
He said that punishment's going to come to them too, but after he uses them.
Right. Yeah, he's certainly not overlooking things. And we can get a little, I guess, get our blinders on and are focused on this moment and forget that God has a large plan that he's executing. And he's bringing destruction on Judah. Was that just?
Yes.
Oh, yes. They deserve justice long ago. And he's, in his long suffering, allowed them to exist for this long through Hezekiah's reforms and then Josiah's reforms, and now his patience is up. So that's just, but he's using Babylon. Does that mean he approves of Babylon? Certainly not. He's using them. Like we've looked at with Assyria, how it talks about, does the axe boast over the one who wields it? He's using them like an axe to destroy. And so that doesn't mean he approves of them. Their destruction is going to come as well. In fact, in terms of these world empires that we're studying from here on down to Christ, Babylon's got the shortest lifespan. This Neo-Babylonian empire rises up here in kind of the 605 time frame. And it's, the end of the 70-year captivity is also the end of Babylon. So they're not a very long-lasting world empire. They're very powerful and do some amazing things in the days of Nebuchadnezzar. Even today we talk about the hanging gardens and different things that were done in Babylon that were magnificent, but a very short-lived nation. So in God's eyes, in his time, he's going to destroy them too, and really not very long from now. Have you wrestled with a question like this? Anyone?
I mean, we can always be frustrated by those who are so worldly, being so blessed, you know,
Mm-hmm.
on earth and having such easy lives. I mean, even if you don't stand, if you stand for the truth, that makes you an outsider. That makes you not. I mean, we've kind of referenced it, but like you're looked on as being so hateful and judgmental and
Mm-hmm.
all the things, even though that's not how you would even be expressing, you know, those views. So it's just, you're just kind of made to feel separated, which is how we're supposed to be. But in the worldly sense, you could be like, well, wow, would be so much easier. My life would be so much easier if I just kind of, I don't hold on to quite as tight to certain things.
Mm-hmm. Right? To compromise a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you see the wicked prospering. Norm?
It's something that typically the younger, the strong have this types of questions because things are in their way. And I'm just surrounded by this, God, if you just take care of these things, it'd be out of my way.
Hmm.
You have that wrathful, that vengeful, ire that you have built up. And it's easy to fall into. At the same time, you kind of grow out of it when you realize you're in that position because fixing that's your job. Like as a Christian, we always look around, and all the things out around the world. Guess where we're living? We're in the world. The United States is no exception to any of this. It's not a Christian nation. It's not a moral nation. We are surrounded by the enemy. We always have been, and that's our work, is to go out around the community here, where we live, the people around us, and try to save them. And we don't have to worry about the rest of the states. We don't have to worry about the rest of North America or South America. Where are we now? And who's around us now that needs to be saved? And if everyone did that, we wouldn't have to worry about all this other stuff that's going on. We'd be set to the work.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. So we can certainly be challenged by this idea of being surrounded by those who are prospering in this life, and yet God is not for them. We shouldn't infer that God is for them just because they are prospering. Let's notice a few other details here that are in chapter 3. Habakkuk's attitude. What should we learn from Habakkuk's attitude? Who would like to read verse 1 for me? Chapter 2, verse 1. Tim, do you have that?
Chapter 2, verse 1.
Yeah.
I will stand my watch and set myself on the rampart and watch to see what he will say to me and what I will answer when I am corrected.
All right, what kind of attitudes do you see from Habakkuk there? Highly commendable attitudes, are they not?
Humble.
He's humble, certainly. What else?
He's doing his work. He's going to stay on his guard post. He recognizes his position was God put me on a guard post. I'm going to stand my guard.
Yeah, I imagine him on the walls of Jerusalem, and waiting for these Chaldeans to come, right? Watching to see if what God has just said is going to happen, but he's still asking these questions to God, and you see the right attitude of humility, because when we're asking God a question, like it seems like you're not being fair, God. Might be the way it comes across, and yet we need to have an attitude of, you're the potter and I'm the clay, right? You're the one who sees everything and I can't see anything. I'd like to know the answer. You have all the answers, God. And so how does he even describe, what's he expecting from God? What kind of an answer? correction. Yeah. My version says reprove. How I may reply when I'm reproved. So he's expecting to be reproved for even asking these questions to God. And maybe that's exactly what he deserves. We need to have that same humble heart, not one that's constantly accusing God of injustice. This is not fair, God. I shouldn't have to go through this, God. You're not doing what you said you would do. I read this promise over here, and I'm not seeing it. And I know folks who have fallen into that cycle of attitudes and lost their faith in God. Why aren't you doing what you said? And that's the wrong attitude. This attitude is, I've asked a question, and now I'm going to close my mouth, and I'm going to wait. I'm going to listen. And where do we get our answers? We get our answers in God's Word. And it's up to us to read it, right? The Word is living and active and powerful. It pierces into our hearts. And so we have to read it and consume it, and we're going to find answers. Sometimes I'm amazed at how I am reading something that feels a little random on where I chose to read, and yet it's answering the question and the problem that I'm dealing with right now. Other times I don't see that. And so it's not that that's a promise, so just randomly pick a page, you'll find your answer. No, I need to be patient and continue seeking God. Continue reading, and I might find 10 years later, oh, there's the answer to that question I've always wrestled with. But if I had a bad attitude for those whole 10 years until I found it, what's the risk that I run? You've got weak faith and you fall away, or the Lord returns and you're not in a right condition with Him. Do you have a question, Shannon? Comment?
Kind of, and then of course that happens.
We got 5 minutes.
But just that we have to be willing. I mean, if we're seeking, if we have a question about something, we got to be willing to listen too.
Yeah.
I'm just like our kids. We got to listen to them. They got to listen to us.
Right.
But
Yeah, if you ask a question, and you see Jesus' responses to questions sometimes vary, and it shows that He knows the heart of the one asking the question. Some people get an answer. Some people, they get a question right back. Some people, He doesn't take the time to answer their question because they know it's a test and their heart's not right. They're not seeking the answer. So we need to have a right heart. All right, let's talk about a couple other things. Habakkuk 2:4 should stand out to us because it's a quotation in the New Testament. He says, "Behold, as for the proud one, his soul is not right within him, but the righteous will live by his faith." And that's quoted over in Romans chapter 1 and perhaps elsewhere. How does this foreshadow the gospel of Christ? Jesse?
So Habakkuk was told in verse 2, right, to write it clear upon the table.
Yes.
So I've always paralleled this to, like, if you could imagine in November of 40, somebody in Hawaii was walking around with a sign that says, "Hey, the Japanese are coming."
Yeah.
Or in Poland in 38 with the same warning. But for the people who listened and it stuck and they ran, if you will, by faith, then they were spared. So God's judgment that was coming was final and total, except for those who listened to the message and got to escape. So we make it relatable in the New Testament because, well, in the case of the gospel, it's not so much a temporal kind of punishment. It's obviously going to be the end of time, right, and total and final. But the only people that will escape that judgment are the people who have obeyed the gospel.
Absolutely. Yeah, that command, if you haven't noticed that in verse 2, Habakkuk 2, verse 2, write it on these tablets that the one who reads it may run. So they were given a very specific instruction. We saw it in Jeremiah, right, that they needed to just give themselves over to the Babylonians and you'll be saved. So in that way, the just or the righteous ones are going to live by their faith in the command. Jesse?
It's the same as Matthew 24.
Okay.
When Jesus gives that warning about
Yeah.
it being
Destruction of
If you're
Jerusalem.
watching and you're paying attention,
Yeah.
and you will run, and not even go downstairs to pick anything up.
Yeah. You don't want to be in a city that's being destroyed by Babylon, by Rome, by anybody. So he's telling you to run. Now, the gospel of Christ is the just shall live by faith. Right? That's Romans chapter 1. That's, he's not ashamed of the gospel, for it's the power of God unto salvation. And it's what has the power. And it's, let me just flip over there, Romans chapter 1. Verse 17, for in it the righteousness of God is revealed from faith to faith, as it is written, but the righteous man shall live by faith. And then the next few chapters in Romans explain a system which is justification by faith in what or in whom? Not just in God. What do we need to believe? What's the crucial element of our faith? Christ. The coming of Christ, that Jesus is the Christ, that Christ died on the cross, that Christ was raised from the dead, those are going to be crucial elements of belief. And so here it was a relatively simple command. You need to run to get away from the Babylonians. But in our day, it's you need to believe in Jesus. And that's where your salvation is going to come from. And if you believe in Jesus, you're going to do what he says and, of course, obey. So this is not at all contrary to justification by obedient faith. But we're justified by faith because we believe the message that God is providing to us. Any last words, Dad?
One question I have, on one hand, they're being told to turn themselves over to the Chaldeans, but on the other hand, they're being told to run. So how do you do both?
Well, not run away, but run to them. And so it's a little more specific in Jeremiah when it says you are to fall away to the Chaldeans, fall away to Babylon. So go on out to their camp, turn yourself in, raise their white flag, because God's with them, he's not with you. All right, we'll put out a new lesson and move into a little bit more history of the next few kings next week.